Anything said on this show represents opinions only and are not meant to be taken as financial or legal advice. Welcome to Finances the Other F Word, a podcast about the money behind current events where we do the research so you won't have to. Here is your host, Mello, certified financial planner and author of Finances the Other F Word. Catch Mello live on the Station Head app Wednesday mornings at 6 a.m. Pacific Time via the handle @MomentOfMetal. Listener discretion is advised.
So the song was getting ready to cut off. So I wasn't cutting it off to be an asshole. Like the song was getting ready to cut off because Apple Music does that shit all the time, or Station Head does, or whoever. So this whole show is going to have Slayer music because I'm fucking pissed off. And if Todd was here, he'd want to throw some chairs. I miss that guy. I hope he's doing well. So last week, didn't do a show because my birthday was Thursday. And I went to Puppetry of the Penis on Saturday, which for those of you who are not, maybe have been to Vegas or not a local, we have an erotic heritage museum here, which is not really great. It's not sexy like how you think it would be. It's like not good. Anyway, they have a show called Puppetry of the Penis. And I thought legit that it would be like dudes, you know, with like puppet strings, like working their junk. And that is not it at all. It is actually what they call genitalia origami or penis origami. So for an hour, and Zoe, for those of my Finances, the Other F Word listeners, my old co-host on the podcast, she took me. And for an hour, we sat and watched dudes like fold their junk into different things. It was very disturbing. I do have a picture that I can send you if you want to DM me through Finances the Other F Word on Instagram, all one word. I will send you a picture of it. You can't even tell what it is. So it's not going to make you weird, but they allowed us to take the pictures, so it's not, you know, like something that we did nefariously. I didn't take the picture, but Zoe, for those of you who know Zoe, she could not wait to grab her camera. She could not grab it fast enough. It was very, very disturbing. And the whole set today is Slayer because I'm kind of pissed off because as I was researching the show, I kept getting angry and wanted to like flip over desks and shit. And Dream Warrior did a wonderful show on Back to the Beginning where he covered, you know, the Axe and said lots of Sabbath music, obviously. And of course, Slayer fucking killed it. And, you know, an Angel of Death, Tom could still hit the scream. It's fucking crazy. And so anyway, I'm just fucking irritated as fuck today. And we are going to talk about private equity. Now, I've touched on private equity before, but I haven't touched on it in this manner. And the thing is that when we talk about private equity, there's companies that are completely private, that have autonomy, which are not regulated by the SEC, which do not need to have transparency, do not need to give any type of quarterly reports or any reports of any kind. And then there are public companies. So to go back to an example that you guys might remember a little easier, Twitter used to be a publicly traded company. When Elon and his associates took it over, they took it private. Okay, so basically they took it off the market. There's various different ways you have to do that, and I didn't focus on that in this show because it's not relevant to what the aim I'm trying to talk about. And then it became a private firm. So private equity is basically a company that owns a whole bunch of shell companies that then own a whole bunch of properties, and there's just corporate bullshit layering that they layer, and then they fucking layer, and then they fucking layer, and then they fucking layer again, right? In order to convolute the legal system, in order to make it hard to trace who the actual owners are, and protect themselves from direct liability. And Nevada is notorious for this. When I worked at the bank, I don't know how many fucking shell companies I opened because Nevada is favorable for businesses. And there's other states that I'm sure go through exactly the same thing. And so there was tons of these people who would come in, they would open up a shell company, and they'd let it sit for 2 years. And then what they would do is they would go do whatever they were going to do with it, but they would let it sit in season. And the 2-year mark was the sweet spot with the shell companies here in Nevada. And, you know, I was just like, okay, cool, let's open an account, you know. And at the time, as a banker, this is way before I was licensed and a CFP, I didn't realize the purposes of it. Like at first I thought, oh yeah, the shell company is gonna put another arm's length away from you. That makes sense. Until you get into private equity firms, and then it becomes nefarious. And you know, we just had the passing of the Trump bill, and we are no doubt going to feel the ramifications of that. And we're not going to talk about that today because my blood pressure's already up and I'm already fucking irritated. So let's talk about what private equity is first so that you can understand how it works. So private equity firms, so there is pension plans, there are 401k plans, there are a lot of different retirement plans, there's endowment funds. There's also what's called institutional investors, and there's different, you know, limits you have to hit in order to be like considered a fluent investor. And anyway, so all these people put money into private equity firms who, again, are, just like the name says, are private. They are not public. They do not have to disclose information. They do not have to be subject to the Securities Exchange Commission, SEC rules, and they can basically do whatever the fuck that they want to. And if that's the case, like if that was just it, and they were doing it and they were turning a profit for the pension funds and the endowment funds, and they were, you know, getting their pound of flesh, cool. You know what? Like, yay, fucking capitalism, America, raw, all that fucking bullshit. We just had the 4th of July. But that's not what they're fucking doing. What they're doing is they're buying things that are directly affecting the 99%. They're affecting our healthcare, they're affecting our grocery stores, and they're affecting our wallet. So this isn't just a thing like, okay, you know, good for them. Let them, you know, earn their money, and, you know, who gives a shit, right? This is not separate from you. All right. As a matter of fact, this has more impact on us, the 99%, than fucking anybody else. So what happens is that before I get into that, let me give you guys a little bit of statistics and facts. As of 2023, private equity firms manage $12.1 trillion in global assets. So let me just refresh your memory. 1,000,000 seconds ago was 31 years ago. 1,000,000,000,000 seconds ago was 31,000 and something years ago. I want you guys to always keep in mind the difference between million and the difference between trillion, so you don't get lost in the words. I want you to understand how fucking big the leap is from millions to trillions. You feel what I'm saying? So, as of 2023, private equity firms manage $12.1 trillion in global assets. Okay? Now, in the U.S. alone, 11.7 million workers are employed by PE-owned firms, private equity-owned firms. Okay, so that might not sound startling as we get into this, until you start learning about the PE playbook. And when I say PE, I mean private equity. It's just easier than me keep saying private equity. And when you start seeing what the private equity companies are actually trying to do, you will understand the relevance of that statistic that over 11.7 million workers are owned by PE firms. Because when we're talking about private equity and its utter fucking dominance in our economy and how it is affecting your money, we also need to understand that they're also entrenched in our labor markets. And as I touched on and I will get into later, they are also entrenched in our fucking healthcare, and so on and so on and so on. And so this is why I'm so fucking irritated already today. And it's like, I'm 11 minutes into my show and I'm already pissed and want to like fucking punch people in their face, right? Not people like us, people like them. Anyway, so private equity firms, private, okay? So what they do is they get cash from pension funds and endowments and from these institutional investors or high net worth individuals, whatever you want to call them. And they go, okay, cool. What we're going to do is we're going to take your money, right? And then we're going to go out and we're going to get a loan. And we are going to leverage that money. And I did, you know what, I'm not going to sidetrack myself. I do this all the time. And then when I go back to edit for social media, it's fucking hard. So stay on track, Mel. So what they do is they take and they leverage that money and then they go buy a company. All right. So think Toys R Us, think Payless Shoes. All right. These are brands that we all grew up with, at least most of my listeners, right? And they take that money, and then what their whole goal is to do is they have a shell company, okay? And they do this leverage, it's called a LBO or leveraged buyout, and they borrow a portion of the money. Sometimes it's, 90% of the buying purchase price. Sometimes it's only 60% of the purchase price. It depends. Then they bring in these other investors' money, and they buy a company with the actual intent to basically strip it of its assets and or declare bankruptcy. And then they walk away with more fucking cash. The problem is the businesses that they're buying are shit that we need, right? But then what they do is they take that debt that they raised to buy the company. Let's use Toys R Us because they're a real life example. I'm going to give you some numbers on later. And then they take that debt and they lift it off of the shell company and they put it onto the books of the company they just purchased. Okay? So that would be like me buying a business and then, well, that's exactly what it is. It's buying a business with borrowed funds and then taking those borrowed funds off of the responsibility of the shell corporation, the company who purchased it, and then moving it onto the assets of the company that they now own that they just purchased. You guys feel what I'm fucking saying right now? Now, let's follow that through that's completion, all right? If I am a company and you just bought me out, all right? And not only did you just buy me out, and you're trying to turn a profit, because remember that the whole purpose of private equity is to get a return for their investors, okay? So you buy me as a company, and then what happens is that you acquired a whole bunch of fucking debt in order to acquire me. So you take that debt and move it onto my books. Now what that means is that my cash flow as the company is stymied, right? That means that I'm starting to choke. My cash flow is starting to choke. But then they do one better, because they're only in it for a quick fucking buck. What they do is they take, if you own the land and you own the building, which was also the case with Toys R Us and some of the Payless stores, if you own the land and you own the building, fantastic. That's an asset of the company. So what the private equity firm is going to do through this shell corporation is they're going to sell that off, right? And they're going to pocket that money, and then they're going to lease back to you at market rates, which are typically 2 times higher, how much it would be if you didn't own the land and the building, and then they're going to lease it back to you. Which also means that now not only are you saddled with a whole bunch of fucking debt as a company that you did not acquire, that was used to acquire you and now has been thrust upon you and dumped on your books. Now on top of that, the fucking property that you used to own as a company, your asset and your land, is now being leased back to you long term. Now, PE, private equity companies, they're usually in it for 3 to 7 years and they're getting the fuck out. So if you take a company, and I'm going to keep saying Toys R Us because that's one I have the most statistics on. If you take a company like Toys R Us and you buy them which is what happened to Toys R Us, and then you sell off all their land and their buildings, then you lease it back to them. You're putting them in a long-term lease, 15, 20 years, 10 years. So what happens if you exit within 3 to 7 years? Oh, well, then that's a penalty. Well, guess who's getting the penalty for that? The fucking private equity firm who was the one who bought them and put them in that situation in the first fucking place. Then what happens is that the company, now under pressure to make returns for their people who put up the money in order to do the leverage buyout, now what they are expected to do is cut costs, cut staff. So here we go. This is why that relevance of that statistic I gave you at the top of the hour, that over 11.7 million workers are employed by PE firms. This is what they do. They put in cost-cutting measures and they start laying off employees. When Toys R Us went into bankruptcy, all the executives of the PE firm still got paid. Everybody still got paid. The private equity firm still got paid. But when they went into bankruptcy, all of their employees got laid off, no severance. Done. Now, listen to what the fuck I'm telling you right now, okay? If we have 11.7 million fucking people in the United States employed inadvertently by PE firms, which 9 times out of 10, they have no idea who really owns them. They have no idea probably that they're actually owned by a private equity firm, nor do they understand how a private equity firm works, which is what I'm telling you right the fuck now. And if these private equity firms, if regulations change and if tides turn, or we hit the skids in the shitter like we did in 2008, then these private equity firms can start dropping all of this shit to get liquid cash. And all these motherfuckers, you and me and your neighbors and your family members who work for these assholes, are completely fucked. Do you hear what I'm saying to you? Like, God damn it, be pissed off. Okay? And I'm not saying this to piss you off, right? I'm not saying this to make your Wednesday morning harder or fuck you up or any of that kind of stuff. What I want to educate you so we get pissed off and we start fucking changing things. Because every regulation changes that affects the 99%, and every single regulation change that doesn't affect PE's carried interest, which we will talk about in a second, which is another way the rich get richer, is just doing us more damage. And we can't fix the situation if we don't know the situation exists. And that's the point that I'm trying to make through this. So as I'm talking through everything that is private equity, I want you to think beyond my words. I want you to think about, how does that affect the economy in the broader scale? How does that affect me? How does that affect my family? These are the things I want you to be knowledgeable about. I'm not trying to be pissed off for the sake of rage. I want you guys to understand what is going on so that we can have a better understanding of things that are changing, that are making it harder for the 99% to move up. And I want to help you close your wealth gap. Whatever your wealth gap is, I want to fucking help you close it. And I want to make it better for your kids and better for you. Okay? So private equity, their playbook is you buy, you strip the assets, and then you flip it. That's what fucking private equity does. And they start getting lean real fast. They cut jobs, they cut wages, they start selling off the asset like the real estates. And then on top of all this shit, they start charging management fees back to the company for managing the company. Okay? So let's put a pin in that for just a second. You go into the company, you saddle them with debt they didn't ask for, you strip them of their assets, you lease back the property that they used to own. Then what happens is their cash flow is restricted. They can no longer compete in the marketplace or keep up. Again, Toys R Us. Toys R Us could not focus on any online presence to go up against Amazon as the brick and mortar stores died, because all of their fucking cash flow was was tied up in $5 billion in debt that they were saddled with. I'm going to get to those stats here in a second, from the PE company that purchased them, which means that they ended up falling under Amazon. They became obsolete, and then they fucking folded, and all of their assets went to bankruptcy, and all of those employees got fucked with no severance. Now, take everything I just said, and let's listen to this, okay? Let me give you another fucking statistic. 25% of U.S. hospitals are now owned or backed by private equity. Nursing homes that are owned by private equity firms have a 10% higher mortality rates. So your fucking loved ones, your parents, they're in this. Retail and grocery store chains, they're buying them too. And so what they're doing is they're closing non-profitable stores. And what that is doing is that is increasing food deserts. So for those of you who are not familiar with the term of a food desert would be a radius in a neighborhood, typically a poor neighborhood or a black and brown neighborhood, where there is not adequate grocery stores or good, clean, healthy food. It depends on how you want to interpret your food desert. And what they're doing is they're going in and they're closing out the grocery stores that are typically in rural areas because they're not profitable, which means that they might be closing a grocery store that's the closest fucking grocery store for some families that are 20 miles out. Do you guys hear what I'm saying? And then they fucking repeat. And then, as soon as I calm down and play a song, which is probably not going to be very calming, we're going to start talking about, we're going to cover how they get tax advantaged, interest, how they pay less than most of us in taxes through carried interest. We're going to talk more about the management fees, and we're going to start diving into all of the different ways that this actually affects your wallet. So for those of you who are my listeners today, whether it's, you know, finance is the other F word, or people who are sweet enough to join me here on this show, this is why I'm so fucking angry today. And all of the music is reflecting that, because I'm just fucking over it so much. So I don't know. I have actually the concentration of songs I realize are basically just from 2 Slayer albums, but I don't give a shit. We're gonna play them anyway, and I'm not gonna worry about that. Ah, shit. Seriously, come the fuck on, Apple Music. You suck the biggest dicks ever. My God. I'm looking at the comments, I'm listening to the music, and all of a sudden, like, it's just like, cut, motherfucker, like, done. I fucking hate that shit so much. That's what happens when I'm like reading through the comments. And so for my finances, the other F word listeners, I really want you to come here and join my live show, and not because it's my show. I'd like to hear from you instead of you guys just hearing me doing my podcast episodes all the time. But more importantly, there is so much good information that goes on in the chat. There's links that are dropped. We have people that are working in different industries that are currently owned by PE firms, who are sharing their information and what they're experiencing. And so this is the thing that I love about my show. And I mean this so sincerely, that the listeners who listen to me are so smart in the fact that they are engaged, they are on topic, they are informed, and they are commenting, and they are dropping books that they've read, they're dropping articles. And this is what makes, besides the metal, this is what makes me love doing this show, and why I keep coming back after fucking AMP went tits up, and, you know, started all the fuck over at Station Head for as long as that's going to be around. Because for many of you who, I got to turn on you guys, I'm so pissed off right now. I'm actually hot. Plus the sun's starting to come up in Vegas. It's 6:28, and it's like going to be balls hot. I think it's going to be 105 today. So the thing is that I want you guys to experience this. I really, really do. So take the invitation, and show up, please. That would be fucking great. My handle is @momentofmetal on Station Head. But great fucking comments. Great comments, and the insight that people have on private equity, and how it's affecting, their life and everything, is so important. And so there's that. All right, so I'm still going on about private equity. We're talking about private equity today, but we're talking about the dangers of private equity as it affects us, right? They're not doing this shit in a vacuum. As much is done in our economy or politically in our country, it is not done in a vacuum. But specifically, the way that private equity is engineered, it is affecting us. So let's go back to my grocery store example, okay? First of all, grocery stores run on the smallest margins. Their margins are razor thin. You know, like if you think of like a Cartier or a Tiffany's, their margins are fucking ridiculous. Like that ring that you're purchasing, you know, did not cost, you know, $20,000 to make, and they're selling it for $25,000. That's not how that shit works. Those profit margins are padded. Grocery stores are notorious for having razor thin profit margins. Okay, so this is why we see with a lot of the grocery stores, they have extensions where you might go into your grocery store. We have a huge Smith's here right by my house that has a bar in it that sells beer and wine, relatively cheap, by the way, and it is packed like a motherfucker. You go by there on a Friday, it is wedged between the liquor section and the bakery and the deli, and you go through there and people buy food from the deli, they take it into the bar area, they have sports on the TV, and that motherfucker is packed with people drinking. Okay. They also have a whole section that is clothing. For those of you who are from the Pacific Northwest, Fred Meyer. Think of Fred Meyer. This is what the Smiths is by my house, but it is mainly a grocery store. But the reason why they have clothing and the reason why they have housewares and the reason why they have the bar is because they need to increase the profit margins. Now, if you go to rural America, you are not going to find a fucking huge Smith's that has a bar in it. Right? So the thing is that means, if you take it to its conclusion, that those grocery stores are running on razor thin profit margins, as most of everything they are selling are food-based commodities of some sort. Okay? So if I'm a private equity company, if I'm a PE company, and I go into a grocery store and I'm like, well, fuck, I'm barely making any money on this, and this grocery store is not making money, I have a couple choices. I can close it down and say, fuck everybody, and sell off all the assets, which if you think about your Big Lots and you think about your TJ Maxx's and you think about your Home Goods and you think about even, depending on where you live, Ross, those food items that they have, some of them are close to expiration, yes, but also a lot of them are sucked up in these liquidation of these grocery stores. So if they decide to close down the grocery store, they're gonna take it, they're gonna close it down, they're gonna basically get rid of it, they're gonna sell off the assets, and away they fucking go onto something else. Fuck the community that it served. Fuck any of the people and how far they had to drive. And remember, when we're talking about our poorest areas, which are typically black and brown areas, they do not have reliable transportation. They have public transportation, assuming that they have public transportation where the fuck they live. I'm dropping a lot of F-bombs today, so just fucking ride with me because it's not going to change, all right? And so the thing is that they're closing down the grocery store, or what they do is they cut the hours, they cut the staffing, they cut the quality of food, and then basically they still fuck that community that has supported that grocery store, that relies on that grocery store. They have still fucked them because they have altered what they need to survive to put food on their table in the sake of profit. Now, you can argue with me, but Mel, there's markups on all kinds of food and that's all profit. Yes, it is, but you understand what the fuck I'm saying? This is not the grocery store trying to stay in business by putting a little padding profit margin on a grocery item. This is a fucking PE company who is not only is stripping in my example that I'm using now, stripping the grocery store of its assets, cutting the employment of the people who depend on it for jobs, they are also affecting the community at large. And then on top of that, they're charging usually 2% management fee to the company for the honor of being managed by these fuckers. All right? Now, on top of that, they get what is called preferential tax treatment through carried interest. Now, you guys have heard me talk a lot about capital gains on this show. To just remind everybody, capital gains are taxed at 20%. If it is a long-term capital gain on an investment, and you have held it over 366 days, you are taxed at 20% tax rates. That's a long-term capital gain. I'm not talking about short-term capital gains. They don't fall under that. Long-term capital gains, 366 days plus 20% tax bracket. Now, most of my listeners, your effective tax rate is probably 22 to 25%. Okay? So the richest Americans who have the assets, who gain money, get preferential tax treatment over you, which I've talked about to death, but I want to fucking remind you again. Because guess what? With this big, beautiful bullshit, it didn't change. It didn't fucking change, okay? But now let's look at carried interest, because this is something different, but also very similar to the capital gains. Let's say that I am a PE company, private equity company, and I buy a business for $100 million, okay? And let's say in 3 to 7 years, I sell it for, and we're not talking about stripping it, we're not talking about getting the assets, we're not talking about any of that stuff, and we're also not talking about the management fee. I'm just talking about the carried interest portion, so stay with me. I buy a business for $100 million, all right? And then I sell it for $200 million 5 years later, all right? The first $100 million goes back to the people who gave me the money to do the leveraged buyout in the first place to buy the company. That's a return of principal. You gave me $100 million, I'm giving you your investment back. There you go. Then the profit, which is the next $100 million, 80% of that typically goes back also to the people who fronted the money. These are the endowment funds, these are the pension funds, these are the institutional investors. And then 20% goes to the private equity firm and is considered carried interest and is taxed at 20%. Oh my God, if you could fucking see me, if I would swear to God, I want to fucking punch somebody in the face so bad right now. My fist cannot get tighter, okay? So what that means is that nurses and school teachers and you and I, in whatever fucking context that we do, we're paying more in taxes than these fucking private equity assholes who are getting millions of dollars at 20% tax rate. And that didn't fucking change. And to be fair, Trump and Biden have both spoken out against carried interest. But Congress gets lobbied so fucking hard by private equity groups that they refuse to move on it, as impotent as Congress has become anyway in the first fucking place. And so what happens is that they're allowed to come in, damage our communities, run, and let's go economically here for a second. Let's talk about Payless shoes. Payless shoes, we grew up on Payless shoes. If you're a Gen Xer or an elder millennial, you probably have found that you have bought more than one pair of shoes at Payless. That was where we went when there was a school dance or we needed some little, very cheap shoes to wear. It was like basically Payless was Temu and Shein before that was ever fucking a thing. Payless was a victim of a PE firm that came in, bought them, stripped them, flipped them, and dumped them. Okay? But let's look at this in the broader economic scale. This is what I want you guys to do. Payless had inexpensive shoes, right? Now, if you were a mother, a single mother of 4, I don't give a fuck, a single mother of 2, and you need shoes for your kids, what happened is that by private equity going in and doing this to Payless, you have just removed a lower cost option out of the market for a family that is typically in the average American class or less. Okay? So this has ramifications like Toys R Us, that's consumer discretionary spending. That's toys and shit and video games and stuff like that. But we're talking about groceries and shoes. When you are eliminating these companies out of the economic sphere, what you're doing is you're eliminating those cheaper options for families who need them. And this is where I want you guys to understand how this is all connected, because it is not you. It is not you. You do not need to work harder. You do not need to be, it's not that you're horrible with the money. All this bullshit that they gaslight and tell us. When you start pulling back the curtain and you realize who's running what and how it's running and how it's affecting you, It might not make you feel super hopeful in the moment, but it has got to give you some peace of mind to know that their gaslighting is complete and utter bullshit. And that's all I care about in the grand scheme of things. I don't want you to give up. I don't want you to get tired. I don't want you to get so frustrated that you don't try. I want to give you information so that you can improve your situation. And I forgot to mention at the top of the hours, my budgeting boot camp I have made completely free. Completely free. Okay. So for my Finances Other F Word listeners and anybody who's listening to me on Station Head, if you want to do my free budget boot camp, you literally go to, thanks to Kodak, he actually brought this up in one of my shows, freebudgetbootcamp.com. The website is almost finished. You should be able to sign up, and it's the third Monday of every month. And I will be there, and it's about an hour and a half, and I will teach you how to budget for free so you can start getting your shit straight and getting your money right. So do it, okay? So that's carried interest, all right? We already talked about them offloading debt. All right. So we already talked about the fact that they have bought a lot of and actually, I think Juarez was mentioning that the hospitals in his area are purchased by a PE, and they've been closing the hospitals and doing different things. This is all in the comments. You guys, the audience is so smart. You really need to get in on this. They're amazing. So like I said to you before, that 20%, 25% of all hospitals in the United States are now owned by PE firms. And what that has meant, well, let me get to that in a minute, and up to 30% of emergencies, so you might have seen a lot of these ER, at least in Vegas, they're all over the place now. We have these buildings that are ER rooms. They're just freestanding. They're not attached to a hospital. They're literally just on their own fucking plot of land, ER. And there is literally, I have 3 of them within probably a 10-mile radius of me, plus a full-fledged hospital with its own working ER. They own up to 30% of those. Okay? And what they do is just like they do the grocery stores, they go in and they close out the rural hospitals that aren't making a lot of money, which of course puts health at risk. And I mean, you understand that. I don't have to go into that. But it also has been shown, according to the Yale School of Public Health in 2021, that PE-owned facilities charge up to 39% higher costs on ER. Now, an emergency room is not something you can choose to go to, right? Like if shit hits the fan, you need to go where you can get immediate medical attention. You're not going to have time to stop and go, oh, are they going to charge me 39% higher? Fucking ridiculous, all right? But now let me touch on, you know what, let me play a song. I need to calm down. Let me play a song and let me come back and let me touch on some more stuff. And I don't want to frustrate you guys. I want you guys to be educated so we start changing things. That's what I fucking want. Anyway, here's Slayer again, and I'll have to watch it and make sure it doesn't cut off again, which it will. See, I fucking got you now, Apple. You little bastard, you're getting ready to run out on me. So I'm calming down. Maybe when I have a topic like this, I should play classical music in between so we can all like fucking, or some reggae, you know, so we can all like sit back, roll it up, and just fucking mellow out and escape life for a hot minute. But okay, so now I want to keep this in the bigger context of things that I'm talking about right now. Now, I have spent a ton of time on my show talking about housing affordability, okay? I've done a show where I went through decades and decades and decades of how the price of housing has changed. I talked about inflation in general, but this isn't inflation. This isn't inflation, you guys. This is greed. So the thing is that when we hear the talking points, well, inflation and the price of everything's going up, it's not just inflation. And the biggest violators have nothing to do with inflation. It's fucking straight up greed. And now when we're talking about housing, okay, I also did a show where I talked about how statistically speaking, not statistically speaking, by the numbers, I don't care how you feel, by the numbers, they have not sustainably built enough housing to replace the houses that have been burnt down or torn down, okay, and or enough to keep up with the population, which has made housing in short supply, which has aided over the many 50 years, decades, over the increase of housing prices, making it harder for families to get in and own a home. I'm not talking about a mansion. I'm talking about a home. Okay? Now, those are all things. They're all true. They're all valid. But let's talk about something else. One of the other things that PE firms do is they buy mobile home parks and they buy apartment buildings. And when they go into the apartment buildings, they raise the rate. They raise the rate on the rent. So I want you to walk with this through me. You have a dying middle class who cannot afford to purchase a home because the supply of the homes versus the demand, the supply has been so short, the demand has been so high, it has pushed the price of housing up for everyone. So the people can't get into those homes. So what they do is they go rent, which used to be cheaper than buying a home. And they go into the apartments. I have a fucking 1,500 apartment building that just built up the street for me into the desert. Fucking pissed me off. And that's going to be a clusterfuck. That's going to be a fucking clusterfuck. They can't afford homes, so they go into rentals. Okay? And they go into apartments. And then what happens is that these PE firms buy these apartment buildings, and what do? They're trying to turn a profit. Because remember, they're getting paid a management fee, 2% typically, regardless if the business is making money or not making money. They're getting their 2%. Okay? They go in and they start cutting costs, which means that the services and the maintenance of the apartments go down. But then what they do is they raise the rent on these apartments. So then what you have is you have the barrier to entry of buying a home too high for a middle class to get into it. Okay. Then you have them going to an apartment and trying to rent an apartment that now is owned by a private equity firm that has raised the rent on them. So that's too expensive. And they literally have nowhere to go. So one of the things that private equity firms have also done is they buy mobile home parks. So mobile homes are typically your kind of like your next stop in between, renting something and ownership, right? So you lease a plot of land in a mobile home park. You actually own the mobile home. It's considered a fixed property, and that's where you reside. And then you pay them lot rent. And I want you to remember that it's not like that easy that you can just pick up your mobile home and move it. Right? Like if you're thinking of a mobile home attached to a back of the truck, you're just like, yeah, fucking load up, like some shit you would take camping. That's not how mobile homes work. So you're already on a piece of land, and then a PE firm comes in, and we often see rent spike on apartments and mobile home parks of 20 to 40% after the acquisition by a PE. In the example of Haven Park Capital, they raised lot rents in the mobile home park by 60% plus within a few months. Now, if you can't afford to pay for your lot, then what happens is that now you got to fucking move that shit off of the lot. So then where do you go? And then you have a mobile home. And then if you don't own land, where the fuck can you put your mobile home that you're not going to be subject to the same thing? And this, you guys, is a monopoly. The deal is that we can't see how big of a monopoly the PE firms have on the United States because nothing has to be transparent, and there's no SEC involvement. There's no political reach into them. They keep lobbying Congress, and this keeps happening and keeps happening. And I told you guys on the last show that I did that the economy runs because of the 99%. And I'm not saying that to to big you up and big me up. I'm saying that that's motherfucking factual. Okay? Because at some fucking point, the 1%, they're not out buying shit like we are. They're not buying shoes for their kids. They're not out buying groceries in the same amount we do. They're not spending the largest portion of their income on necessities. And it is our spending as the 99% that keeps our economy afloat. And this is why I want you to understand what I'm telling you and why this is so dangerous. Because these private equity firms, besides greedy cocksuckers, right, besides doing all of that, they are affecting us, but they are also crushing the middle class. They're not the only thing crushing the middle class, but they are crushing the middle class. And if the middle class gets crushed, it will grind the economy to a halt. That is not a threat. That is not a me trying to be a rage baiter. That is economics. Motherfucker. Look, read it. That is economics. You cannot have a thriving economy without the middle class. You can't do it. And I am so concerned because I don't want that to happen to you, to me, to your kids, any of it. So we talked about grocery stores, we talked about emergency rooms, we talked about hospitals, we talked about rents, but they are also buying childcare facilities, educational facilities, and veterinary clinics. So for people like me who don't have kids, when you're fucking with my dog, now I'm going to fight you, right? Like we're going to fucking fight now. So what they're doing with the child cares, they're coming in, they're doing the same thing. They're stripping the staff. And what they often do, this is delightful, and they also do this with hospitals, is that they have other shell companies, right, who own other medical facilities, all right? And they're all associated way up in the layers and layers of bullshit that they're hiding. And what they do is they take those staff from those facilities and they move them over to the other facility that they're trying to now man, whether it's in healthcare sector or childcare or whatever. And remember that they're getting paid 2% management here, 2% management there, 2% management there. So if you buy, let's take this a step further. If I'm a PE equity firm and I didn't research this, but as I'm talking, I would almost guarantee you that this is happening. If I am a PE firm and I own a healthcare provider over here and I own a nursing home over here and I want to take my healthcare people and I want to move them over to my nursing home because I'm cutting wages, which also adds to stagflation, wage stagflation, not stagflation, that's stagnation, wage stagnation, right? Then I'm going to cut out the people who make the most money. I'm going to hire a whole bunch of people with less experience, maybe less credentialed, right? But if I'm the PE firm, I'm going to fucking hire a staffing agency. I'm going to buy a staffing agency somewhere in the middle of there. And then those people from that healthcare institute are going to come through the staffing agency. And then they're going to end up landing in my nursing home or my other child care facility, whatever. And think 2% on that one, 2% on that one, and 2% on that one. 2% management fee on the original healthcare, 2% management fee on the staffing, and 2% management fee on wherever the ultimate destination is. And this is how, one of the ways that they are continuing to overlap. And corporations do this all the time. That is not something that's specific to PEs, but the thing is that your child care and the education of your children and the vet care for my dog are all tied up in this, where they're cutting costs, they're cutting back services, and they're raising the price on that. And so when we're looking at the education of our future children, this has a direct effect to it, and teachers are already being squeezed so hard trying to teach kids. And I will be doing another presentation with the Georgia Economic Council coming up here, where I will be talking to another set of teachers, actually I think this time in Kansas, about, all of these types of things. And I just hope that we can make a difference. So we talked about how the extraction works, and then their goal is to dump the business and walk away. And I think actually, Yeah. So let me just play one more Slayer song, and then I'm gonna wrap up. So after the Slayer song, give me 10 minutes, and then we will all be good. So here's Disciple. Okay, so I was still reading through all the comments. God, just such great stuff in here, and I wish I had time to address all of it. But we're going to wrap up. So for those of you who are just joining me, first of all, hey, what's up? Thanks for popping in. We've been talking about private equity. Today, we've been talking about how private equity companies are affecting your wallet as the 99%. We have been talking about how they come in and they buy a distressed company, or sometimes not a distressed company. They strip it of all its assets. They debt load it with debt that they took out in order to actually buy the company that they're putting the debt load on, restricting their cash flow, making it so that they can't compete, cutting workers, often with no severance, with the intention to either bankrupt the company intentionally or to go and try to flip it at a profit within 3 to 7 years. One of the things I didn't talk about is that they will often take a public company, which falls under SEC regulations, Securities Exchange Commission regulations, and they will take it from being public and they will make it private, and then they will take it public again. So let me walk you through that real quick, okay? So we're going to follow Twitter. Twitter used to be public. Musk and Associates took it over and took it private. Okay. Now, one of the things that Musk has the ability to do is that at any time he could take X, rebranded now as X, and he could take it public again. Now, remember that when a company does an initial public offering, which is also known as an IPO, that is the first and really only time that they get money off of those shares. And I use this example all the time, but I'm going to use it again. If I buy a Slayer CD, right, because that's what we're playing today, and I paid $20 and I listen to it and I enjoy it, and then I sell it to you for $10, Slayer is not getting action off that $10, right? That's now my $10, right? Because I bought it, I own it, and I sold it to you, and now that money is mine. Or if I sell it to you for $30, then that full $30 is now mine, regardless of what I paid, whatever. So when we're talking about, I just lost my train of thought. I hate when I fucking do that, because as I'm talking, I'm thinking about something else, and then it overrides whatever it is I'm thinking about. IPOs. So the point is, here we go, coming back. I'm coming back. Mel, come back. So when they do an initial public offering, right, they're going to generate money off of those shares, and that's kind of like their only time. So they can come in and they can strip a company of their assets, they can run it to bare bones in the hope of flipping it as a profit, or they can run it into bankruptcy, or they can take a public company private and then make it public again in the future and get even more money. And they do all of this by avoiding SEC oversight. Now, granted, when they go to do the IPO, they have to fall under different regulations before they can take the shares to market. But all of this other shady shit, not only is it buried under mountains and mountains of different companies that you have no transparency for, on top of that, everything they're doing is in the shadows. They don't have to have any type of transparency to us. They don't have to have any type of transparency to anyone else. Okay. So we have a whole bunch of different PE companies out there, and Beyond the Bar dropped in there that twice now they have had their employers taken over by PE companies, and he got out beforehand. Beyond the Bar is very ambiguous. Like, I still don't know if it's a female or a male. So I'm just going to use they, and we're just going to go from there. But comes to my show a lot. So thank you. I appreciate that. And all of you guys, you guys are amazing. So when we're talking about assets under management, I told you earlier in the hour that private equity firms currently hold $12.1 trillion in assets globally. Blackstone assets under management for the year of 2023 reached $1.04 trillion. And a lot of your 401ks and those of you who are lucky enough to have pensions, they are involved with these private equity firms. So this is the thing that makes it so fucking hard to unravel, is that you are probably indirectly benefiting off of your suffering, assuming that you have access to a 401k plan, which I told you guys a statistic last show or the show before that, or maybe it was in another video I did, where I think only 43% of Americans have access to a 401k. Or something stupid like that. I might be wrong on that statistic. If somebody wants to Google it and correct me right now, that would be great, because I'd really like to know what that statistic is, because maybe it's not I hope it's not 43%, but for some reason 43% sticking in my mind. So if somebody wants to Google me and check me live on air, that would be fucking great, because I want to give out good information. So you could be benefiting off of the same thing that is destroying you. Not destroying you. That's an exaggeration. I don't want to speak in absolutes. That's affecting your wallet as the 99%. And that is 100% accurate. And they're doing it all the time while they are taking management fees and firing people and increasing unemployment for the time, getting rid of jobs, cutting public services, and then dominating through monopolies the local businesses in the area and completely smothering them. Because remember, you might have this bakery shop that looks like it's a local bakery shop, but it's owned by a PE firm. Okay. And then you have your little mom and pop bakery shop, and the PE firm is going to be able to advertise. They're going to be able to leverage all this different stuff that can inevitably run the smaller business out. So then when you're talking about small business owners, and I had a stat, and I back in one of my shows that I did, and I can't remember what it is, and I don't want to say it because I don't want to be wrong, but there it talked about the percentage of employees that are employed by small businesses in our economy. And so this is where the dominoes start to fall. And this is what I want to weave through everything I'm talking to you guys about, is how these things that seem like they're independent on an island, and when people say, oh, this doesn't affect me, or when people say, oh, that's them, that's not going to have any relation to my life. Yes, it fucking is. And you owe your due diligence to yourself to educate yourself. And maybe the only education you do is listening to my show. Cool. Awesome. You're doing something, right? But you owe yourself the due diligence to figure out how this stuff is working. Because again, we can't change anything if we don't have the knowledge. And then what happens is that let's go to Payless, and let's talk about Toys R Us, and I'm out of here. Okay. So even if they take the company into bankruptcy, they still win. All right. So when Payless, this is according to Bloomberg, when Payless went bankrupt after its private equity acquisition, the executives got bonuses. They all got paid out bonuses, and 16,000 plus employees lost their jobs with no severance in bankruptcy. So now if you've been listening to my show since I started here an hour and 10 minutes ago, okay, then you can follow the logic of how everything they've did, and just put your mind into everything you see. How could I make money off of that? How could I make money off of that, right? And maybe that's just because of what I do for a living. That's how I look at everything. So I'm looking at Station Head constantly, like how are they making money? How do they want to make money? AMP, everything. So it becomes easier to understand when you watch the flow of money, and you just assume that most people are greedy beyond belief. Okay. And so if they can cut, dice, chop, or do anything to give you sashimi, which I know is a type of fish and not a cutting, but I don't know, it sounded right for me right there. They will do it in the sake of greed and money. And we see this over and over and over again. So for Toys R Us, and then I'm going to be, let me find it in my notes, because I have the actual data on it, and I don't want to, here we go. Here's the data. So let's Toys R Us. We all love Toys R Us, and I'm going to end this with this. In 2005, Toys R Us was purchased by KKR, Bain Capital, and Vornado. using $6.6 billion in borrowed funds. Then what they did was the private equity company offloaded $5.3 billion of the debt that was used to purchase Toys R Us onto the balance sheet of Toys R Us. So for those of you, balance sheets, asset minus liabilities equals your net worth, okay? And so they borrowed $6.6 billion. They took $5.3 billion of that, and they took it off of the shell company who had borrowed the money to buy Toys R Us and then put it on Toys R Us balance sheet, right? Then what they did was they sold off the real estate, and they leased back the properties to Toys R Us. And then Toys R Us could not compete. And then the management fees were still coming out regardless. And Toys R Us had to declare bankruptcy in 2017, and 33,000 workers U.S.-wide lost their jobs with no severance. And in the meantime, the PE firms got favorable tax rates for their carried interest that I described at the top of the hour of 20% taxed as long-term capital gains rates. All of their employees were paying ordinary income rates, which are typically higher, making their effective tax rate higher than that 20%, lost their jobs with no severance. 2% management fee was taken out yearly for the management of the assets, for the pleasure of them to be sold, stripped of all their assets, and for all of those people to lose their jobs. I don't even know what to say to that. And yes, so Kodak's in the house. I shouted you out, Kodak, earlier. So for those of you who are interested in taking my budget boot camp, the website should be up. It was Kodak's idea, so high five to him. Amazing. Freebudgetbootcamp.com. You can sign up. I do them once a month. They are the third Monday of every month. And they go for an hour and a half, and the website should be functioning today. So if you go to freebudgetbootcamp.com, you can sign up, and I will be more than happy to teach you how to budget so we can start closing the gap between the 99% and the 1%. And that's really what I'd like to do. And Kodak pointed out that they did it to Red Lobster too, and yes, they did. Yes, they did. So with that, I think that is everything. I'm just trying to, thank you, CPL. You're always so sweet. You really are. CPL is always just like giving me love. And I got to tell you, it means so much to me because I don't want to rage bait. I'm not trying to rage for the sake of raging. I'm trying to piss you off so that people make a difference, so that people understand and they start changing things for themselves. That's what I'd really like in my perfect world. And I appreciate all of you guys. And the brutal broker from Lebanon, man. You know what I mean? I appreciate you guys for hanging out with me. I sincerely do. And with that, finance is the other effort, and station head, I'm going to calm down. And I hope you have a great Wednesday. And I am out. This bitch.
Thanks for listening. Please like, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.